The crystalline spires of Zephyr Prime trembled as another wave of destruction swept across the outer rim. High Counselor Varix pressed his scaled hands against the viewing portal, watching distant stars blink out of existence one by one. Each dying light represented billions of souls consumed by the unstoppable force that had been advancing through their galaxy for the past 3 cycles. The Devourers showed no mercy, no reasoning, no communication. They simply consumed everything in their path, leaving behind empty void where thriving systems once existed. The greatest military minds of the Zephyrian Empire had thrown everything they possessed at this cosmic plague, only to watch their fleets dissolve like morning mist against an inferno. "The Caltheran defense fleet has fallen silent," reported Captain Zex, his usually steady voice cracking with exhaustion. "That makes 17 sectors completely dark. The Devourers will reach the Nexus worlds within 4 solar rotations." Varix closed his eyes, feeling the weight of an entire civilization resting on his shoulders. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this section of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They had been explorers, peacekeepers, and guardians of countless species. Now they watched helplessly as everything they had built crumbled into nothingness. "Sir, the emergency council is assembled," announced his aide, a young Zephyrian named Kelix whose scales had lost their vibrant blue color from stress and sleepless nights. "They await your decision on the final evacuation protocols." The evacuation protocols. The plan to abandon their homeworlds and flee to the furthest reaches of known space, hoping the Devourers might somehow lose interest or burn themselves out. It was a coward solution, and everyone knew it. The Devourers had shown no signs of slowing down, no patterns of behavior that suggested they would simply stop their consumption. Varix made his way through the corridors of the High Command Center, past walls lined with holographic displays showing the steady advance of the Dark Force. Emergency crews rushed back and forth, some carrying wounded refugees from the latest attacks, others hauling critical data cores containing the accumulated knowledge of their civilization. The council chamber buzzed with tense conversation as representatives from dozens of species debated their next move. The Altarians with their graceful, flowing forms huddled together near the quantum communicators. The stocky, rock-like granite lords stood in solemn silence, their ancient wisdom offering no solutions to this unprecedented crisis. Even the enigmatic void dancers, beings of pure energy who rarely involved themselves in physical realm politics, had manifested in desperate attendance. "We must evacuate the core worlds immediately," insisted Admiral Korath, the grizzled veteran whose tactical brilliance had won countless battles against conventional enemies. "Every moment we delay costs more lives." "And go where?" challenged Elder Murthan of the Verdant Coalition. "The Devourers consume everything. Distance means nothing to them. We have seen them leap across vast empty spaces to reach inhabited systems." "Perhaps we could attempt communication once more," suggested Dr. Solani, the Empire's leading xenopsychologist. "There must be some intelligence behind their actions, some way to reach them." "We have tried everything," Varix said quietly, his voice cutting through the debate. "Diplomatic overtures, mathematical sequences, artistic expressions, even ritualistic offerings of our most precious resources. The Devourers respond to nothing except the presence of life itself." The chamber fell silent. They all knew the truth, even if speaking it aloud felt like surrendering to despair. The Devourers were not merely another hostile species or rogue artificial intelligence. They represented something far more terrifying, a force of pure consumption that existed beyond conventional understanding. "There is one option we have not discussed," said a voice from the shadows near the chamber's edge. Everyone turned to see Keeper Thane, the elderly curator of the Empire's most restricted archives. His appearance at a council meeting was unprecedented, as he rarely left his underground vaults filled with forbidden knowledge and dangerous artifacts. "Speak, Keeper," Varix commanded, desperate enough to consider any possibility. Thane stepped forward, his movements careful and deliberate. In his gnarled hands, he carried a data tablet containing information that made even the bravest council members shift uncomfortably. 3 cycles ago, when the Devourers first appeared, I began researching historical parallels. My search led me to texts so old and dangerous that they have been sealed away for millennia." "What did you find?" asked Admiral Korath. "References to a previous incursion," Thane replied. "Nearly 50,000 years ago, the galaxy faced a similar threat. The records are fragmentary, deliberately obscured, but they speak of a desperate alliance that summoned aid from beyond known space." The council members exchanged worried glances. Summoning rituals and forbidden knowledge were topics that made even hardened military officers nervous. The last time their civilization had dabbled in such practices, entire star systems had been quarantined for centuries. What kind of aid? Varix asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. Thane activated his data tablet, projecting ancient symbols and text fragments into the air above the council table. The writing seemed to shift and writhe, as if alive and resistant to being observed. They summoned what the texts call the species even gods fear. The references are unclear about their nature, but the results were decisive. The ancient threat was not merely defeated but completely eliminated from this galaxy. And what happened to these summoned beings afterward? Elder Murthan inquired. The records end abruptly, Thane admitted. But the threat never returned, and our galaxy entered its longest period of peace and prosperity. Until now. The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Some council members immediately rejected the idea as too dangerous, while others argued that their current situation already represented the worst possible outcome. The debate raged for nearly an hour before Varix called for silence. "Show us this summoning ritual," he commanded. Thane hesitated. "High Counselor, the requirements are extensive. The ritual demands precise astronomical alignments, rare materials from across the galaxy, and participants from at least a dozen different species. More importantly, the texts warn that once begun, the process cannot be stopped or controlled. We would be entirely at the mercy of whatever answers our call. As opposed to being entirely at the mercy of the Devourers?" Admiral Korath pointed out grimly. The truth of that statement hung heavy in the air. Outside the chamber's protective walls, the Devourer fleet continued its inexorable advance. Long-range sensors showed the dark mass consuming the last of the Outer Rim colonies. Soon, they would reach the populated core worlds where trillions of beings lived their daily lives, unaware that their existence balanced on the edge of a knife. The astronomical alignment occurs in 47 hours, Thane continued. The convergence of 7 major star systems with the galactic core creates a brief window where the barriers between dimensions become permeable. If we are going to attempt this, we must begin preparations immediately. Varix looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had spent their entire lives dedicated to protecting and nurturing life throughout the galaxy. They were scientists, explorers, diplomats, and peacekeepers. None of them were prepared for the kind of desperate gamble that Thane was proposing. "What are the specific requirements?" Varix asked. Thane consulted his tablet again. "We need crystallized time fragments from the Eternal Nebula, consciousness seeds from the dreaming worlds, and quantum anchor points established at 17 specific coordinates throughout this sector. The ritual itself must be performed by representatives from 12 different species, each contributing their unique psychic resonance to the summoning matrix." "How long do we have to gather these materials?" asked Dr. Solani. "If we dispatch our fastest ships immediately, we might acquire everything needed with hours to spare," Thane replied. "But the greatest challenge will not be gathering materials. The real risk lies in what we might summon. The ancient texts suggest that these beings exist outside normal spacetime, beyond the influence of natural law. They are described as having power that makes gods tremble." The implication was clear. They might be trading one extinction threat for another, possibly worse one. But, as another alert chimed through the chamber's communication system, announcing the fall of yet another defensive fleet, the choice became even starker. Varix stood slowly, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon him. In the next few minutes, he would make a decision that would either save their galaxy or doom it in an entirely new way. The faces around him reflected the same terrible understanding: they had reached the end of conventional options. "Begin the preparations," he ordered. "Send our fastest courier ships to gather the required materials. Alert all member species that we will need volunteers for the ritual. And may whatever forces govern the universe have mercy on us all." As the council members dispersed to carry out their desperate mission, Keeper Thane remained behind, staring at the ancient texts glowing on his tablet. Hidden within the fragments of old writing, barely visible unless one knew exactly where to look, were additional warnings that he had chosen not to share with the council. References to the summoned species being reapers of tyrants and the nightmare of those who would consume worlds. The text spoke of beings who had faced down cosmic horrors and emerged victorious, but who carried within them something that made even benevolent gods withdraw in caution. In 47 hours, the Zephyrian Empire would discover whether their desperate gamble would save them or introduce them to something far more terrifying than mere extinction. The countdown to the summoning had begun. The ritual chamber deep within Zephyr Prime's core hummed with otherworldly energy as representatives from 12 different species took their positions around the massive summoning array. Crystallized time fragments from the eternal nebula pulsed with soft, rainbow light at precise intervals around the chamber's perimeter, while consciousness seeds from the dreaming worlds floated in perfect geometric patterns overhead. High Counselor Varix stood at the central podium, his hands trembling slightly as he reviewed the ancient incantations one final time. Around him, the volunteer representatives maintained their positions despite the growing sense of wrongness that permeated the air. The Altarian delegate, her flowing form shimmering with nervous energy, hummed harmonic frequencies that resonated through the chamber. The Granite Lord Elder pressed his rocky hands against the quantum anchor points, feeling the fabric of reality strain under the building ritual force. 30 seconds to alignment, announced the chamber's monitoring system. Above them, through layers of protective shielding, the 7 star systems moved into their prophesied configuration for the first time in 50,000 years. Captain Zex monitored the situation from the observation deck, his eyes fixed on both the ritual progress and the tactical displays showing the Devourer fleet's advance. They had perhaps 18 hours before the dark mass reached the first core worlds. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Beginning primary invocation, Varix called out, his voice carrying across the chamber's specially tuned acoustics. The ancient words felt strange in his mouth, syllables that seemed to twist reality around them as they were spoken. The crystallized time fragments began spinning faster, their light growing more intense with each passing moment. The consciousness seeds descended slowly, each one containing the distilled essence of dreams from beings who had transcended physical existence millennia ago. As they touched the quantum anchor points, space itself seemed to bend and warp. Several of the volunteer representatives gasped as they felt their minds touched by something vast and alien. Energy levels reaching critical threshold, reported Dr. Solani from her monitoring station. The dimensional barriers are thinning rapidly. The chamber filled with a sound that existed beyond normal hearing, a resonance that seemed to vibrate through every atom of matter present. The air itself began to shimmer, and shadows moved independently of their sources. The Void Dancer representative flickered between states of existence, struggling to maintain physical form as reality became increasingly unstable around them. "Something's happening," whispered Kelix, Varix's aide, as he watched the displays from the observation deck. "The quantum field is fluctuating beyond anything we've ever recorded." At the center of the summoning array, a point of absolute darkness appeared, growing larger with each second. Unlike the consuming void of the Devourers, this darkness seemed to pulse with purpose and intelligence. The temperature in the chamber dropped rapidly, frost forming on surfaces despite the energy being channeled through the system. "Portal stabilizing, Dr." Solani announced, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. The readings on her instruments made no sense according to conventional physics. Whatever lay beyond that expanding darkness existed according to rules that their science couldn't explain. The darkness suddenly flashed brilliant white, temporarily blinding everyone in the chamber. When their vision cleared, something had changed fundamentally about the space around the summoning array. The air felt heavier, charged with potential energy that made their scales and skin tingle with anticipation. A voice spoke from the portal, clear and unmistakably alien, yet somehow translated directly into each listener's mind in their native language. "Interesting. It has been quite some time since anyone attempted the old rituals. We had wondered if this galaxy still remembered our arrangement." High Counselor Varix stepped forward, fighting to control his fear and project authority despite being in the presence of something that his instincts told him was profoundly dangerous. "We are the Zephyrian Empire, guardians of this galactic sector. Our civilization faces extinction from an unstoppable force called the Devourers. Ancient texts suggested that your species might aid us as you aided our predecessors." A figure began to materialize within the portal's edge, though its features remained indistinct and seemed to shift based on who was observing it. What struck everyone immediately was not its appearance, but the sense of barely contained power that radiated from its presence. The crystallized time fragments around the chamber began spinning so rapidly they became invisible, their light now a constant, brilliant glow. "Devourers," the voice repeated, and there was something in its tone that made several of the volunteer representatives step back involuntarily. "Yes, we are familiar with that particular problem. They represent one of the more persistent nuisances in this dimensional cluster." "Nuisances?" Admiral Koratha's voice came through the communication link from the command center. "They have consumed entire star systems. Our greatest fleets cannot even slow their advance. The figure seemed to turn its attention toward the voice, and everyone in both the chamber and command center felt the weight of that gaze. Your fleets are impressive by local standards, but you fight an enemy that exists partially outside conventional spacetime. Traditional weapons and tactics are insufficient. Can you help us? Varix asked, his voice barely steady. Help is an interesting concept, the figure replied. The ancient compact that your predecessors established with us included specific terms and conditions. We provided military assistance in exchange for certain considerations. The question is whether your current civilization is prepared to honor such an arrangement. Keeper Thane stepped forward from his position near the edge of the chamber. The text spoke of a successful alliance. What were the terms of that compact? The figure's attention shifted to Thane, and the elderly keeper felt his mind touched by something vast and analytical. You have read the surviving fragments, but much was deliberately obscured. The terms were simple enough. We eliminated the threat to your galaxy, and, in return, we gained territorial access to regions beyond this dimensional boundary. Territorial access? Dr. Solani questioned. There are realms adjacent to your physical universe where we prefer to establish certain facilities. Your predecessors granted us sovereignty over uninhabited dimensional space that we found useful for our purposes. The arrangement proved mutually beneficial. A new alert chimed through the chamber's systems. Captain Zex's voice followed immediately. High Counselor, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the Devourer fleet. They appear to be accelerating their approach. We may have less time than estimated. The figure within the portal seemed to sense the urgency. Your current crisis requires immediate attention. We are prepared to honor the ancient compact and provide military assistance. However, you should understand that our methods may differ significantly from your expectations. What do you mean? Varix asked. We have observed your species' approach to warfare. You favor massive fleets, coordinated strategies, and overwhelming force applied through conventional weapons. These methods reflect admirable organizational skills but lack certain elements that prove essential when facing existential threats. The temperature in the chamber dropped further, and several of the monitoring displays began showing impossible readings. Energy levels that should have overloaded their equipment registered as perfectly stable, while spatial coordinates seemed to shift randomly despite their equipment remaining stationary. Our approach involves different principles, the figure continued. We do not merely defeat enemies. We ensure they cannot return, cannot adapt, cannot evolve beyond their current limitations. This requires methods that some might find unsettling. Elder Murthan of the Verdant Coalition spoke up from her position near the quantum anchors. Are you saying that you would completely eliminate the Devourers? Elimination implies they would simply cease to exist, the figure replied. What we offer is more comprehensive. We ensure that not only do the current Devourers stop functioning, but that the cosmic conditions that allowed their existence become permanently untenable. The implications of that statement sent a chill through everyone present. They were discussing power on a scale that transcended anything their civilization had ever encountered. The figure seemed to sense their unease and continued speaking. Your concern is understandable. The ancient compact included safeguards that protected local civilizations from unintended consequences of our interventions. We have no interest in conquering or consuming inhabited regions. Our objectives lie elsewhere entirely. What kind of safeguards? Admiral Korath demanded. Dimensional barriers that prevent our military capabilities from affecting inhabited space beyond the immediate target. Think of it as a cosmic quarantine that ensures our weapons only destroy what we specifically intend to destroy. Another alert sounded, this one more urgent than the last. The Devourer fleet had apparently detected some change in local spacetime and was moving faster than ever before. Their arrival at the core worlds was now estimated at less than 12 hours. We need a decision, Captain Zex announced. The evacuation fleets can't move the civilian populations quickly enough. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Varix looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who represented billions of lives throughout their galaxy. The choice before them was stark and terrible, but the alternative was certain extinction for everyone they had sworn to protect. What do we need to do to activate the compact? He asked. The figure stepped fully through the portal, revealing itself to be roughly humanoid in shape but composed of what appeared to be living shadow shot through with veins of starlight. when it spoke, reality itself seemed to bend slightly around its words. Speak the formal acceptance of terms, and we will begin deployment of our fleet. Be aware that once we engage the Devourers, the process cannot be stopped until the threat is completely neutralized. Varix took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would echo through history. On behalf of the Zephyrian Empire and all allied civilizations, I formally accept the terms of the ancient compact. Please help us save our galaxy. The figure nodded once, and, suddenly, the chamber filled with a dozen more shadows, each radiating the same sense of barely contained power. Deployment begins immediately. Prepare your people for phenomena they have never witnessed. The next few hours will determine the future of this entire galactic region. As the figures began to fade back through the portal, their voices echoed through dimensions in perfect unison. The hunt begins. The first sign that something extraordinary was happening came when every sensor array across the Zephyrian defense network simultaneously registered readings that defied comprehension. Ships that shouldn't exist appeared on their displays, vessels that seemed to bend space around themselves and move according to physics that no known science could explain. Captain Zex stood frozen at his command station, watching as the tactical display showed dozens of contact signatures materializing throughout their defensive perimeter. Unlike the consuming darkness of the Devourers, these new contacts pulsed with controlled energy patterns that made his instruments struggle to maintain coherent readings. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," reported his communications officer, her voice tight with nervous confusion. "It's coming from something approximately 10,000 kilometers off our port bow, but our sensors show empty space in that location." "Put it through," Zex commanded, his military training overriding his bewilderment. The voice that filled the bridge was unmistakably the same one they had heard in the ritual chamber, though now it carried the crisp authority of military command. "Zephyrian vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We are beginning tactical assessment of your current situation. Please maintain defensive positions while we evaluate Devourer capabilities." High Counselor Varix's voice crackled through the communication system from the command center below. "Admiral Chen, this is High Counselor Varix. Can you provide any information about your fleet composition or battle strategy?" A pause followed, filled with subtle background sounds that suggested intense activity on the human vessels. "Counselor, our initial scans indicate the Devourer fleet consists of approximately 40,000 units operating under a distributed consciousness protocol. They appear to be using quantum tunneling technology to bypass normal spacetime restrictions." Dr. Solani's voice joined the conversation from her monitoring station. "Admiral, our analysis suggests that conventional weapons have no effect on their hulls. They seem to exist partially in another dimension." "We've encountered similar entities before," Admiral Chen replied, and there was something in her tone that made everyone listening pay closer attention. "The dimensional phasing is a defensive mechanism, but it creates specific vulnerabilities that can be exploited with the right approach." On the bridge of his flagship, Captain Zex watched his sensor displays as the human fleet began moving into attack formation. What struck him immediately was the fluid coordination between vessels that seemed to anticipate each other's movements with impossible precision. No communication delays, no hesitation, just seamless tactical evolution that adapted to changing conditions in real time. "How are they coordinating so effectively?" whispered his navigation officer. "Their ships are spread across light minutes of space, but they're moving like a single organism." The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice joined their communication channel, younger and more casual than the Admiral's formal military bearing. "Hey there, Zephyrian friends. This is Commander Jake Morrison. To answer your question about coordination, we use quantum-entangled neural networks that allow instantaneous information sharing across any distance. Pretty handy for fleet operations." "Quantum-entangled neural networks?" Dr. Solani repeated incredulously. "The energy requirements for maintaining quantum entanglement across such distances should be astronomical." "Yeah, it used to be a problem," Commander Morrison replied cheerfully. "But we figured out some tricks for tapping into zero-point energy fluctuations. Turns out the universe has plenty of free power if you know where to look for it." Elder Murthan's voice carried a note of growing amazement. "Are you saying your species has mastered zero-point energy extraction?" "Mastered might be a strong word," another human voice interjected, this one carrying a slight accent that the universal translators couldn't quite identify. "We've gotten pretty good at it, though. I'm Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Chief Science Officer." We found that most advanced civilizations eventually develop zero-point technology as a necessity for interstellar operations. The casual way these humans discussed technologies that represented theoretical impossibilities to the gathered alien civilizations sent a ripple of unease through the Zephyrian command structure. But, before anyone could ask follow-up questions, Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chatter with military urgency. All units, Devourers are beginning their approach pattern. They appear to be using the same consumption formation that destroyed your Outer Rim fleets. Initiating countermeasures. What followed challenged every assumption the Zephyrians had about space combat. Instead of forming traditional battle lines or attempting to match the Devourers' overwhelming numbers, the human fleet scattered into what appeared to be completely random positions throughout the battlespace. "Admiral, your formation appears tactically unsound," Admiral Korath observed, his strategic training unable to make sense of what he was witnessing. "You're giving up all positional advantages." "Respectfully disagree, Admiral," came the reply from Admiral Chun. "Positional advantages assume your enemy fights according to conventional physics. The Devourers don't, so neither do we." The Devourer fleet approached like a wave of living darkness, their ships moving in perfect synchronization to create the consuming field that had destroyed everything in their path. As they drew closer, space itself seemed to distort around them, reality bending under the influence of their dimensional phasing technology. "Devourers are beginning consumption pattern deployment," reported Commander Morrison. "Energy absorption fields are activating across their formation. They're preparing to drain all power sources in the area. This is where it gets interesting, Dr. Tanaka's voice added with what sounded suspiciously like excitement. "Everyone might want to watch your sensor displays carefully." The human ship suddenly vanished. Not destroyed, not moved, but simply ceased to exist according to every detection method the Zephyrians possessed. The space where 43 human vessels had been positioned now registered as completely empty, as if the fleet had never existed in the first place. "Where did they go?" Captain Zex demanded, frantically checking his instruments. "We didn't go anywhere," Admiral Chen's voice replied calmly. "We just stepped outside normal spacetime temporarily. The Devourer's consumption field can't drain energy from sources that exist in quantum superposition." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the Devourer fleet suddenly convulsed as if struck by invisible hammers. Massive explosions erupted throughout their formation, but not from any visible weapons fire. The dark ships writhed and twisted as their hulls were torn apart by forces that appeared to originate from within their own structures. "What's happening to them?" Elder Murthan asked in amazement. Commander Morrison's voice carried obvious satisfaction. "Quantum mines. We dropped them into their dimensional phase space while we were in superposition. When the Devourers try to phase back to normal space, they'll find some unpleasant surprises waiting for them." The Devourer fleet's perfect formation began to collapse as ship after ship suffered catastrophic damage from weapons that struck them in dimensions they couldn't defend. But, rather than retreat, the surviving vessels began adapting, their hulls shifting to new configurations that the humans hadn't anticipated. "They're learning," Dr. Tanaka observed with interest. "Distributed consciousness allows them to share defensive adaptations across the entire fleet instantaneously." "Fascinating. Also problematic," Admiral Chen added grimly. "All units, prepare for Phase 2 operations. The Devourers are more adaptable than our intelligence suggested." The human fleet reappeared in normal space, but now their ships looked different. What had been sleek, almost organic-looking vessels now bristled with weapon systems and energy projectors that seemed to shift and evolve even as the Zephyrians watched. "Adaptive technology platforms," Dr. Tanaka explained, noticing the confusion in the Allied transmissions. "Our ships can reconfigure themselves based on tactical requirements. Standard procedure when facing an adaptable enemy." The second phase of the battle began with the humans employing tactics that made the Zephyrians question their understanding of physics. Human ships moved through space by folding reality around themselves, fired weapons that struck targets before the trigger was pulled, and deployed defensive fields that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "How is this possible?" Dr. Solani whispered, watching her instruments register energy readings that violated fundamental laws of conservation. "Different approach to scientific development," Dr. Tanaka replied matter-of-factly. "Most civilizations focus on understanding the universe as it is. Humans tend to focus on understanding how to make the universe do what we need it to do." The Devourers, for their part, continued to adapt and evolve their tactics. Their distributed consciousness allowed them to learn from each engagement and implement countermeasures with frightening speed. What should have been a decisive victory for the technologically superior humans became an escalating arms race between adaptive enemies. "They're matching our technological evolution rate," Commander Morrison reported, his earlier cheerfulness replaced by focused concentration. "Every time we deploy a new weapons system, they develop defenses within minutes." "Expected," Admiral Chen replied. "Initiate Protocol 7 Alpha. Time to see how they handle temporal displacement." Several human vessels suddenly, aged thousands of years in seconds, their hulls corroding and their systems failing as they were pushed forward through time. But, instead of dying, the ships began operating according to principles from possible futures, wielding technologies that wouldn't be invented for millennia. The Devourer fleet hesitated for the first time since the battle began, their adaptive consciousness struggling to comprehend threats from technologies that didn't yet exist. In that moment of confusion, the human fleet struck with coordinated precision that defied description. "All units, focus fire on the central command node," Admiral Chen ordered. "Once we disrupt their distributed consciousness, the remaining units will lose coordination." The battle reached its climax as forces beyond the Zephyrians' comprehension clashed in a space that had become more battlefield than normal reality. Time flowed in different directions, physics operated according to multiple sets of rules simultaneously, and both fleets fought with weapons that existed in theoretical impossibility. And, slowly, inexorably, the humans began to win. The turning point came when the human fleet did something that defied every tactical manual ever written. Instead of pressing their technological advantage, they suddenly stopped fighting entirely and began broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. "Devourer Collective Consciousness, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We request immediate communication." The silence that followed was absolute. The Devourer fleet, which had been adapting and evolving its tactics with frightening efficiency, suddenly froze in space as if every ship had simultaneously lost power. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, confusion rippled through communication channels. Admiral Chen, High Counselor Varix transmitted urgently, "What are you doing? The Devourers don't communicate. They only consume." "Respectfully, Counselor," Admiral Chen replied, "they only consume because no one has ever offered them an alternative that met their actual needs." Captain Zek stared at his tactical display in bewilderment. The massive Devourer fleet hung motionless in space, their dark hulls pulsing with energy patterns that his sensors had never recorded before. Whatever the humans were doing, it was having an unprecedented effect on their supposedly mindless enemy. Dr. Tanaka's voice joined the conversation, carrying the excitement of someone making a revolutionary discovery. "The Devourer Collective isn't actually malicious. Our deep scans reveal they're refugees from a dying universe, desperately seeking energy sources to prevent their own extinction. Their consumption pattern is survival behavior, not aggression." "Impossible," Admiral Korath interjected from the command center. "They've destroyed entire civilizations without any attempt at communication. Because they literally cannot communicate with matter-based life forms under normal circumstances," Commander Morrison explained. "Their consciousness exists in quantum flux states that interface poorly with conventional neural patterns. But humans developed quantum consciousness interfaces during our early space exploration period." Elder Murthan's voice carried amazement and growing understanding. "You're saying they've been trying to communicate all along, but no one could hear them?" "More than that," Dr. Tanaka replied. "They've been desperately searching for someone who could help them find sustainable energy sources that don't require consuming inhabited systems. Their method of dimensional phasing actually makes them incredibly efficient at processing certain types of cosmic background radiation." The communication channel suddenly filled with a new presence, vast and alien yet unmistakably intelligent. When it spoke, the words came not as sound but as direct conceptual transfer that bypassed language entirely and spoke straight to consciousness itself. "Small beings who speak in quantum resonance," the Devourer Collective transmitted, "you offer communication where others offered only resistance. This is unprecedented in our experience." Admiral Chan's response carried the careful diplomacy of someone navigating uncharted territory. "Great Collective, we understand your need for energy sources to maintain your species' existence. We may be able to offer solutions that don't require the consumption of inhabited space." The pause that followed lasted several minutes, during which the human fleet maintained their position while the Devourer ships began emitting energy patterns that resembled nothing so much as excited discussion. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, crews watched in amazement as their most feared enemy engaged in what appeared to be internal debate. Your species offers alternative survival strategies, the collective finally responded. This concept requires explanation. Our analysis indicates insufficient energy density in this region to maintain our population without consuming organized matter structures. Dr. Tanaka took the lead in response, her scientific enthusiasm evident even through the quantum translation matrix. Actually, you're operating under incomplete information about available energy sources. This galaxy sits at the intersection of several dimensional energy flows that your current technology can't access. What followed was a technical discussion that challenged the understanding of every scientist monitoring the conversation. Dr. Tanaka explained how humans had discovered methods for tapping into the energy differential between parallel dimensions, accessing power sources that existed in the spaces between realities. The dimensional membrane friction alone generates more energy than 1,000 star systems, Dr. Tanaka continued. But accessing it requires specific technological approaches that most civilizations never develop because they focus on matter-energy conversion instead of spacetime manipulation. The Devourer Collective's response carried what could only be described as excitement. Spacetime manipulation for energy extraction. This approach was considered but deemed impossible with our current technological matrix. You claim successful implementation? More than successful, Commander Morrison interjected. We can show you how to build extraction nodes that would provide enough power for your entire species without affecting any matter-based structures at all. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, stunned silence greeted this exchange. Captain Zex found himself watching a first contact scenario unlike anything in their historical records. The galaxy's most feared enemy was apparently willing to negotiate, and the humans seemed capable of offering solutions that their entire civilization had never imagined. This offer requires verification, the Devourer Collective transmitted. Our survival protocols cannot accept unproven energy sources. Understood, Admiral Chan replied. We're prepared to demonstrate the technology immediately. Dr. Tanaka, please activate the Mark 7 dimensional extractor. One of the human vessels suddenly blazed with energy that registered on sensors throughout the battlespace. But, instead of weapons fire or shield generation, the energy was being channeled into something that made reality itself seem to bend and flow around the ship's hull. Holy stars, whispered Dr. Solani from her monitoring station. They're actually extracting energy from dimensional friction. The power output readings are off our measurement scales. The demonstration lasted for several minutes, during which the human vessel generated more energy than most star systems produced naturally while affecting nothing else in the surrounding space. No gravitational disturbance, no radiation emissions, no impact on local matter except for the spectacular light display that accompanied the extraction process. Verification complete, the Devourer Collective transmitted, and the change in their communication patterns was dramatic. Proposed technology provides sustainable energy source sufficient for collective survival. Previous consumption patterns no longer necessary. Excellent, Admiral Chan responded. We're prepared to provide technical specifications and assistance with implementation. However, we'll need assurance that consumption of inhabited systems will cease immediately. Agreement acceptable, came the immediate reply. Collective survival no longer requires matter consumption. Previous actions were survival necessity, not preferred behavior pattern. Elder Murthan's voice carried wonder as she spoke through the communication channel. You're saying that all the destruction, all the consumed worlds, was simply because you didn't know about alternative energy sources? Correct, the collective confirmed. Previous civilizations offered only military resistance or evacuation flight. None offered technological cooperation or alternative survival strategies. This human approach is unprecedented in our experience across multiple galaxies. The implications of that statement sent chills through everyone listening. The Devourers had apparently consumed civilizations across multiple galaxies, always searching for someone who could offer them a better alternative than constant consumption. How long have you been searching for a solution? Dr. Tanaka asked. Approximately 12 million local years, the collective replied. Our home universe suffered dimensional collapse. We fled to this reality seeking temporary refuge while searching for sustainable existence methods. Your species is the first to offer cooperative problem-solving instead of territorial defense. Commander Morrison's voice carried a mixture of sadness and determination. 12 million years of being forced to destroy others just to survive. That ends now. The next several hours involved technical exchanges that revolutionized the understanding of physics for every species monitoring the conversation. The humans shared dimensional extraction technology, while the devourers provided insights into transdimensional engineering that opened entire new fields of scientific study. The modification process will require approximately 72 hours, Dr. Tanaka explained as they finalized the technical specifications. We'll need to upgrade your entire fleet's energy matrix to interface with dimensional extraction nodes. Acceptable timeframe, the collective responded. Collective will maintain current position during modification process. No further consumption activities will occur. High Counselor Varix finally found his voice after hours of stunned silence. Admiral Chen, I must ask how your species developed such advanced technology and diplomatic approaches. The solutions you've provided are beyond anything our civilization has achieved. Admiral Chen's response carried a note of something that might have been pride, though it was tempered with obvious humility. Counselor, humans have a particular talent for finding unconventional solutions to impossible problems. We've discovered that most conflicts arise from unmet needs rather than inherent malice. The trick is figuring out what everyone actually needs and finding creative ways to provide it. But, the technology, Dr. Solani pressed. Dimensional energy extraction, quantum consciousness interfaces, temporal displacement weapons. These represent advancement beyond what should be possible for any single species. Actually, Dr. Tanaka replied, they represent what's possible when a species refuses to accept that something is impossible. Humans have never been very good at respecting limitations, especially when people's lives are at stake. As the technical exchanges continued and modification plans were implemented, the broader implications of the situation became clear. The galaxy's greatest threat had been neutralized not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding and willingness to cooperate. The humans had achieved in hours what the combined military might have dozens of civilizations had failed to accomplish over years of warfare. But, perhaps more importantly, they had revealed that even the most feared enemies might simply be refugees in need of help, if someone was willing to listen and offer alternatives to violence. 6 months after the day the galaxy had expected to end, High Counselor Varric stood in what had once been the Emergency Command Center and was now the headquarters of the new Interdimensional Cooperation Council. Through the massive viewing windows, he could see construction ships from a dozen different species working alongside Devourer vessels to build the galaxy's first transdimensional energy extraction facility. The sight still amazed him. The dark, consuming ships that had once struck terror into every living being in the galaxy now moved with purpose and cooperation, their crews working alongside former enemies to create something unprecedented in galactic history. The efficiency improvements are remarkable, Dr. Solani reported from her new position as Director of Dimensional Sciences. The Devourer Collective's understanding of transdimensional physics has accelerated our research by centuries. We're now able to provide unlimited clean energy to every inhabited system in the galaxy. Admiral Korath approached the viewing area, his expression still carrying traces of the disbelief that had never quite faded since the humans' intervention. The military implications alone are staggering. With dimensional energy extraction, defensive fleets can operate indefinitely without fuel concerns. We're looking at a fundamental shift in how galactic security operates. Speaking of security, Varix replied, what's the status of the human fleet? That's the interesting part, Admiral Korath said with a shake of his head. Most of their combat vessels have already departed for what they call patrol duties in adjacent galactic regions. Apparently, they've received requests for assistance from civilizations facing similar crises. Dr. Solani looked up from her data tablet with curiosity. Requests from other galaxies? According to Admiral Chen, the success here has attracted attention from species across the local galactic cluster, Admiral Korath explained. It seems the Devourer crisis wasn't unique. There are apparently several other refugee populations and existential threats that conventional military responses can't address. Captain Zex joined the conversation, his own amazement at recent events still evident. I spoke with Commander Morrison yesterday before his ship departed. He mentioned that humans have been dealing with crisis management across multiple dimensional boundaries for generations. What we experienced was apparently routine problem-solving for them. Routine, Varix repeated incredulously. They ended a galactic war by teaching the enemy how to survive without destroying others, and they consider it routine. The communication system chimed with an incoming transmission from the dimensional extraction facility. The voice that emerged belonged to a Devourer collective representative, though the harsh alien tones had been replaced by something warmer and more personable. Council Headquarters, this is Harmony Seeker of the 4th Collective reporting successful completion of Extraction Node 17. Power output is exceeding projections by 12%. The dimensional membrane stabilization protocols provided by human engineers are functioning perfectly. Acknowledged, Harmony Seeker, Varix replied, still adjusting to the fact that their former greatest enemy now had individual names and personalities emerging from their collective consciousness. Please extend our appreciation to the engineering teams. Will do, High Counselor. Also, we wanted to inform you that our deep space monitoring arrays have detected dimensional disturbances in the Andromeda region that match the signature of universe collapse refugees. We're preparing to dispatch assistance ships with dimensional extraction technology. After the communication ended, Elder Murthan of the Verdant Coalition spoke up from her position near the strategic planning displays. 6 months ago, we were preparing to evacuate our homeworlds in the face of extinction. Today, our former enemies are volunteering to help other species facing similar crises. The transformation has been remarkable. More than remarkable, Dr. Solani added. The technological advances alone have revolutionized our understanding of reality. The humans didn't just solve our immediate crisis. They opened doorways to entirely new forms of existence. Keeper Thane, who had been quietly observing the conversation from his position near the historical archives, finally spoke up. The ancient texts mentioned that the summoned species would leave a lasting impact on our galaxy. They described transformations that would echo through time itself. I don't think our predecessors could have imagined the scale of change we're witnessing. What do you mean? Varix asked. Thane activated a holographic display showing the current galactic political map. Before the crisis, we had 17 major civilizations, 43 minor species groups, and constant low-level conflicts over resources and territory. Now look at the current structure. The display shifted to show a web of interconnected cooperative networks spanning the entire galaxy. Dimensional extraction facilities provided unlimited energy to every inhabited system, while joint research stations explored technologies that had been theoretical impossibilities just months earlier. The humans didn't just save our galaxy, Thane continued. They fundamentally changed how we think about existence itself. The concept that any conflict can be resolved through understanding and creative problem-solving has become the foundation of our new society. A new communication alert drew their attention to the main display, where Admiral Chen's familiar figure appeared via quantum transmission from somewhere deep in intergalactic space. Her image was slightly distorted by the vast distances involved, but her voice came through clearly. Greetings from the human expedition fleet, she said with obvious satisfaction. I wanted to update you on our progress in the neighboring galactic regions. We've successfully mediated conflicts in 3 different star systems and established cooperative relationships with 2 previously unknown species. Admiral, Varix replied, your species continues to amaze us. How do you consistently find peaceful solutions to apparently impossible situations? Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. Counselor, I think the key is something that humans learned very early in our development. When faced with a problem that seems impossible to solve, we ask different questions. Instead of how do we defeat this enemy, we ask what does this enemy actually need? Instead of how do we protect ourselves, we ask how do we create a situation where everyone's needs are met? Dr. Tanaka's voice joined the conversation from another part of the human ship. It also helps that we're naturally curious about how things work. When we encountered the Devourers, our first instinct wasn't to develop better weapons. It was to understand why they behaved the way they did. But, the technology, Dr. Solani pressed. Your dimensional manipulation capabilities, quantum consciousness interfaces, temporal displacement systems. These represent scientific advancement that should take millennia to develop. Actually, Dr. Tanaka replied with a laugh, they represent what happens when humans get really motivated to solve problems. We've discovered that most limitations exist in our thinking, not in reality itself. When we absolutely need something to work, we usually find a way to make it work. Commander Morrison's voice added to the conversation. Plus, humans are really good at collaborative problem solving. We don't just rely on our own species' knowledge. We learn from everyone we encounter and combine different approaches until we find solutions. As the conversation continued, reports came in from across the galaxy describing the ongoing transformation. Former military installations were being converted to research centers. Trade routes that had once required armed escorts now operated freely thanks to unlimited energy supplies. Species that had been enemies for generations were discovering shared interests and forming new alliances. The most remarkable change, Elder Murthan observed, is in how our young people approach problems. Students from dozens of species are enrolling in cooperative problem-solving programs based on human methods. They're learning to see challenges as opportunities for creative collaboration rather than threats requiring defensive responses. Varix nodded, remembering his own reactions during the crisis. 6 months ago, when Keeper Thane suggested the summoning ritual, I was terrified that we might be trading one extinction threat for another. I never imagined we'd end up with allies who would transform our entire civilization for the better. The transformation isn't finished, Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of excitement. Dr. Tanaka's research team has identified dimensional pathways that could allow instantaneous travel between galaxies. We're looking at the possibility of establishing a truly universal civilization based on cooperation and shared knowledge. The implications of that statement filled the chamber with awestruck silence. Instantaneous intergalactic travel would revolutionize existence on a scale that dwarfed even their recent experiences. The universe itself would become a neighborhood where species could share knowledge, resources, and solutions to challenges that no single civilization could address alone. Will humanity continue to serve as mediators and problem solvers? Captain Zex asked. Admiral Chen's smile was visible despite the transmission distortion. Captain, I think you're underestimating your own species' capabilities. The cooperation skills you've developed here, the willingness to work with former enemies, the creative approaches to seemingly impossible challenges, these are exactly the qualities needed for universal civilization. You're saying we'll become partners in this expansion? Varix asked. More than partners, Commander Morrison replied. You'll become leaders. Humans might have provided the initial technological solutions, but you've proven that you can adapt, grow, and find new ways to apply cooperative principles. The universe needs that kind of wisdom. As the transmission ended and the planning session continued, Varix reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. They had faced extinction and discovered transformation. They had summoned what they believed would be saviors and found teachers instead. Most importantly, they had learned that even the most terrifying challenges could become opportunities for growth when approached with understanding and creativity. The galaxy had been saved not by superior firepower, but by superior thinking. And, now that same thinking was spreading across the universe, creating possibilities that no single species could have imagined alone. The future, once dark with approaching doom, now blazed with unlimited potential.